as they say, follow that. I don't know who the old guy was up there. Hopefully you go far. The sooner the better. I was asked to try and introduce this next session, and this presentation will show you several things. I think people said a long time ago, you know, if you don't remember the lessons of history, you're doomed to repeat them. So let's try and look at where we've come from and how did we get here. You'll see some of the slides that you recognise from earlier this morning from Angel's presentation, and this shows two things. One is we didn't collaborate before we get this, but the second thing is that, as Churchill once said, if you want to get a message over, don't say 20 different things, say one thing 20 times and it might just go in. And mind you, he was talking about politicians who are low retention span. So before Devote's time, pre-Devote, some epoch a long time ago, we had various things. We had WFD that went out to 1 nautical mile or 3 nautical miles in some areas. Habitats, which protection could go out to the 200 nautical mile, but that was because of a court case, the Brent Spar. We had EIAs around developments. We were assessing some large areas, but not very well, not uniformly. And monitoring could be focused, but again on assessments for developments. We started having good areas, good maps of areas, the stuff that's happening, you know, the activities. And we started saying, well, if those activities occur, then that must give us pressures. We were starting to make an assumption that an activity led to a pressure. Now we know that that's not always the case. Then you've seen this diagram before, but actually, no, you haven't seen this diagram before. This is modified. This one doesn't have the limits on for MSFD and doesn't have the limits on for MSPD. It was before Devote. We had control out of these areas. We had some control from some of these areas, but not for all the other areas than that. Again, continuing with pre-Devote, we were very much focused on structural elements. Tony Agadi mentioned this earlier. Structural indicators, things like the Habitats Directive and the Water Framework Directive. But we didn't have indicators for the wider things, especially some of the other pressures. We knew where the activities were, but we were making an assumption that activities led to pressures. And that. We were starting to realise the importance of functioning with biological trace work. We're only just starting. So then when we started looking at these, and we said, oh, well, okay, so we've got WFD and MSFD, and what we're doing was we're going to deconstruct the environment, measure each bit, and then we're going to put it back together again, and that will give us an assessment. The fact that WFD was very much structural, assessing the structural components, MSFD was starting to move the functioning. But what happens if we put it back together in the wrong way? We reconstruct it wrongly, and there's always a but. I can't tell you who said this because I don't remember it. But it was said, not in this building, but another building in Brussels to me a long time ago, that the Marine MSFD should be 3 things. One is based around the Regional Seas Conventions, one based on existing data, and it shouldn't be as complicated as the WFD. Okay, the first one's got a tick, a sort of tick. The second one's got 1 question mark and an exclamation mark, and the third one, well, what the hell? So the Regional Seas Conventions, leading the way, and they're the ones that we should build on. My apologies to Emily, I put OSPAR as number 2 on the grid there, but with a change of tyres, then they might get pole position there. Held common there. The Barcelona Convention is a bit of way back, and with my apologies to Irina, I think Bucharest have got, they need to actually get a good start and come away. So we'd got all that. We'd started then moving towards the MSFD, and so we were starting to know the scale of the challenge. But then we started questioning, have we got enough data? Have we got enough background information for this? Can we rely on what governments are doing, given that governments are now cutting back on their monitoring? Or are we going to have to start merging with other things? And the discussion we had yesterday, are managers requiring excessive data or willing to rely on best expert judgment? We were moving forward, we started to get indicators and assessment for all of these, the supporting elements and also the cause and effect elements. But they were still relying on certain assumptions, and we're still having to question those assumptions there. As you saw yesterday, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, that it was... If that's my children, I've run out of money. If it's my grandchildren, I've got lots of it. So we're starting to look at how good are the data for measuring or for quantifying the system and measuring these boundaries. But again, as we raised yesterday, are our measurements good enough to start standing up to potential legal challenges that we'll have in the future? So what did we need to do? We started looking at clarifying the terms, telling the lawyers and technocrats what their terms really did mean from a science view, trying to show the failures, the anomalies and confusion between the original text and the decision, indicate how to solve these based on science and scientific realism, and give further instructions. And we'll await to see the next Commission decision to see whether or not they took on board anything that we said in this report, which was trying to tell me it was issued a year ago or so. So we worked out in devotes, we've got lots of stuff. There's masses of things we've been doing. There's lots of monitoring, there's stacks of indicators, we've got shed loads of data. But is it the right stuff? Is it in the right place and is it the right amount? And that's what some of the talks this morning are going to lead to. What did we have? Will we get any better? Well, this is the map from the OSPAR Quality Status Report of a while ago, based on data in the early part of the noughties, as they were called, 2001 to 2005. So we're waiting to see, will our future assessments be any better than that? Will we base it on that? Are we using the same data as those of the Regional Seas assessments? Will we get any better than this? Hopefully, but without throwing away the good stuff. And then, as we say, we need the indicators for all of this, which is what we're going to focus on this morning. And this adage in management, no, you can't manage something unless you can measure it. And you can't tell if your management is doing any good unless you can measure it. And that's where we are now. So we've got lots of indicators. We've got very good indicators. One of the things that I did a little while ago, it's not been published yet, was looking at generic indicators. Can we come up with core indicators that are not really relevant just for the European seas, but actually could be transposed worldwide? And this came up yesterday, whether our tools could be transposed. And I think we're getting to the stage where you can export these to an area that doesn't already have them. Can we give a recipe for these? No. But what if our measurements are in the wrong place? This shows an area, you've seen the map before, it's now got the complete map. It's got those red asterisks on it. If we sampled in those areas, this area here would come out in good status. No, we've got the areas where there's no activities, we're into designated SPA areas and so on. And the system works if you've got data-rich area. So if you had those, you would get it. If we took the same monitoring effort, the same number of stations, even in the same configuration, but moved by only a few kilometers, and we used this sampling regime, we would come up with poor environmental status, because there we're hitting some of these activities. And if the activities give pressures, then we're hitting the pressures there. So we have the challenge in all this. So let's finish doing this. We know what we've got to do. We've got to implement the cost-effective monitoring. The only problem is we've got decreasing budgets. We've got to ensure the monitoring reflects the real situation with the real weighting, that it gives a realistic indication following those last two maps. learning how to tackle the big problems, the in combination and cumulative effects, and considering the pros and cons of aggregating this, and whether or not our science monitoring indicators will stay up to the challenge. There's one line that fell off this that I put on it, and that was integrating, Tony mentioned it just now, and that's integrating the the Marine Strategy Framework Directive with the Planning Directive. So where have we got to? Starting with Churchill, let's finish with Churchill. The top of his quotes there is the one relevant to this meeting. The second quote is relevant to every other meeting I go to at the moment. But the top one, I think we've got the tools. We just have to put them together in the right order and that. The bottom picture there shows that even some of us have to stop and relax at certain times, but I guess I was still thinking about the MSFD. Perhaps that's why I was asleep. I was thinking about the MSFD. So hopefully that set the scene for this set of talks and can take us into this whole discussion about the indicators, what we've got, what we have created these last 4 years, and where we can go with them. Okay? Thank you.